Ladies and gentlemen, the platform for research and development, your preferred YouTube channel on research methods, is dedicated to those who have little or no knowledge in research, and those who want to refresh their understanding and knowledge of research as well. Students pursuing research at undergraduate and postgraduate studies would be greatly benefited. We are proud to present to you an inspirational and motivational program for researchers across the globe, especially PhD scholars. The PhD Journey.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and once more, warm greetings to all you viewers out there tonight. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to the third episode of the PhD Journey. And for tonight, we are going to try a different, we'll be focusing on a very specific topic, which is being in control during the pandemic situation. All right, so before we proceed with our program tonight, let me first introduce our two eminent figures or speakers from the academia. Our first panel is Professor Dr. Anthony from Perlis College. Hi, Professor. Welcome to the show tonight.
Hello, evening. Pleased to be here.
Yes, thank you. And I let us now introduce our second speaker, which is none other than Professor Dr. Abdul Hamid Adom, who was the former Deputy Vice Chancellor for Universiti Malaysia Perlis. Okay, welcome, Prof. Hamid. Thank you for joining us tonight. Right, and the viewers can see, both our esteemed speakers tonight are actually Prof. Vice Chancellors in the research and innovation. Actually, Prof. Hamid was also our former Deputy Vice Chancellor when he was actually embarking on the research and innovation domain. And as you can see, Prof. Dr. Anthony is also in the same domain. You're actually the Pro Vice Chancellor, right, for research and enterprise at Taylor's University College. So welcome, and we're very happy to actually have the both of you joining us for tonight's episode. All right, but before we proceed with the program, I have a small request to all our viewers tonight. Please kindly share this live session in your Facebook account. We will be really grateful if you can do that. And if the speakers are ready, I think we can actually proceed with the program. Prof. Hamid, Prof. Anthony, are we ready? Yes? Okay.
Yes, we're ready. Yes.
All right.
But before you begin, if I could just firstly, I want to thank Prof. Amino and his team for organizing this fantastic webinar series. I think the topics are certainly welcomed by students and even people hoping to embark on a PhD. And for all of the hard work that you do behind the scenes to get this series of webinars going, I'm certainly honored to be among the speakers here, and I hope I will do justice to your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Anthony. And we feel the same. Likewise, thank you for actually taking time out from your busy schedule to join us tonight and share, your views, your thoughts, and, advice to all the students out there. Thank you very much. Prof. Hamid, would you like to say a word or two?
I hope I can share some experiences I had as a student, during the time I was a dean. And now, before we started, actually, we had a discussion to say how things has changed due to COVID. So we will try, hopefully, to answer your questions and to maybe actually help you to go through this hard time.
Okay, thank you very much. So without a haste, let me just give a brief overview first, and before I proceed to the questions. All right. I think, as all of us know, that when we are writing our PhD, nothing is more stressful than that, right? When you're actually doing it in a normal circumstances, all right? But I come to think now that, in this pandemic situation, I think working towards a PhD is even more challenging, more stressful. And I think there's a lot of people who would like to know how are we going to actually manage it or handle it. So the situation now is actually becoming more, I would say, uncertain. It's like one moment you are able to, to physically, go to the university, and the next moment, you're under TP. So for tonight's episode, our two esteemed guests will share with you their thoughts, advice, and tips for you to reflect on as you work on your PhD during COVID. Hopefully, our episode tonight will help to ease some of the emotional pain that comes with completing a PhD at this time. And I'm sure that these both panels that we have tonight will help to show you that you're not the only one feeling the way you do. And the way that we are feeling at this moment is actually a normal feeling. So without a haste, without wasting any more time, Prof. Anthony, if you're ready, I would like to start with my first question to you.
Sure.
All right. Prof, during a pandemic, things normally don't go the way you want them to. And one of the hardest things to deal with the new reality is that there's so many things outside of our control. We never had to think twice about logistics. We never had to question our ability to physically communicate with our supervisors, respondents, perform fieldwork, interviews, assess labs, the libraries, travel to conferences, or any of the other things that they are now off limits, things that we took for granted before. Now it's taken away, and we are having to adjust to a totally new kind of learning style. It's I think everybody is trying to adjust and adapt. My question is, how can a student keep up with the momentum in their PhD when they're now having to navigate through their PhD journey, whereby things are now mostly off limits? Things that we, like I said, we took granted. We always could see our supervisors anytime. We could go to the lab, at any time, conduct interviews, collect our data with no interruption. But at this time now, so What is your view? I mean, what is your advice? What is your thoughts on this? Prof. Anthony, please.
Dr. Shamini, thank you for the question.
Yeah.
I think it's important to point out what you said, which is that we never thought about the what if things were taken away from us, the support, the access, and the feeling of being in control. And rightly, things we took for granted. And this this pandemic has forced this situation on us actually quite abruptly. And I guess maintaining the momentum is equally true for both students as well as academic staff or supervisors supervising our students. I think the first thing I would say to students to maintain your momentum, I would ask that you think back to what motivated you in the first place when you started on your PhD. Okay, think back to the glorious times of when you first started. One of the factors of a successful candidature, amongst many others, of course, is your own personal attribute and your own personal drive, which includes things like motivation and discipline. So typically, if you recall back to when you started, students, when you begin their PhD journey, you are incredibly motivated. But as time goes by, life happens, and you lose steam over the semesters for a variety of reasons. And none of them could have had anything to do with the pandemic at all. But the pandemic has actually very quickly and suddenly forced this situation onto us and has forced us to take a deep look at whether our motivations are truly endearing. So, and you have to then re-examine your own drive and motivation for doing a PhD in the first place. Basically, I'm asking you to find back your flame or passion as when you first
started.
Yes. Do you allow this delay to make you lose heart, or do you say, I'm going to toughen my resolve? I started out wanting to do this PhD, and no matter what happens, I will complete it. Do we allow delays to happen, or do we maybe take a step back and re-examine our own schedules, maybe our own workflows, and maybe think of moving bits of work around, things that we are forced to stop. We can't do anything about it, but are there chunks of work that we can bring forward and use up the time, make use of the time usefully, right? Some work can be accomplished during these times. Now, there are, of course, other important considerations, and it comes down very much to the nature of your project that dictates how much you were actually impacted and how much you will be impacted as this pandemic continues. And to be frank, some disruptions are really, really significant. For example, requiring access to laboratories, on-campus facilities. Losing access for 1 month may actually mean setting you back 3 to 6 months, especially for life sciences work, right? It's not a parallel thing. you have to spool up your work, and if you're forced to stop, you have to spool up again. So the disruptions may be longer than that. Now, even though now the situation is improving and we are allowed to come back to campus, we operate under tighter SOPs. So you may not be allowed to work beyond 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, depending on your university's regulations. So there are tighter guidelines. And the situation is even worse for people who maybe depend on things like structured interviews, focus group discussions, face-to-face questionnaires. You have it worse. Even allowing you to come back on campus doesn't solve your problem if you don't even have the chance to generate the data to work with. So I guess these suggestions are really for students that fall into these categories. Okay? I think firstly, we have to acknowledge that if there's a disruption, there's a delay, accept it. We have to acknowledge the delay. But I would suggest you speak candidly and honestly with your supervisor about the impact of the current delays and maybe even expected delays that you are likely to face. And you just need to work out a contingency plan or even a plan A and a plan B or even a plan C. So depending on how the situation improves in the future, you can then quickly move from one plan to another plan. But it's good to remember that the PhD done under any circumstance must still meet the expected standards of a doctoral degree. So it's not about cutting corners or doing less work. It's about finding ways to do work differently. Okay, so review your methods and workflow. Find a way that they can be translated or adapted using virtual environment or online environments. Bring work forward if you can. But what you want to do is to build a new workflow with your supervisor with the expectation of delays built into your workflow. Okay, if you're in one of these categories, there's just no two ways about it. A delay is a delay. So just acknowledge it, but build it into a revised workflow. Okay. So remember, your PhDs, your degree says PhD. It doesn't say PhD plus 1 year delay. Okay. So don't worry so much about whether there is a delay. Yes. It's about the quality of work and the thinking that you put into your degree. Okay? You'll feel proud 10, 20 years down the road.
Yeah, looking back, of course, at this time, maybe some will be stressful, and but I think when we look back, like you said, 5, 10 years again forward, I think you will see, it was not as bad as how it appears to be.
Right.
And it's true that, as you say, that in this kind of situation, there's no point in cutting corners. And I guess you cannot fight the situation because no matter how much you fight, it's going to be how it is. So, and you gave a few good suggestions, as in like having to reschedule and trying to bring forward things that can be done in this mode, rather than putting aside things that need to be, like virtually shifting the schedule to suit the situation that has presented itself as how it is now.
Exactly.
So thank you so much for a very useful advice, and also telling students that in case it's always normal that throughout the PhD journey, your motivation and your feelings or your emotions, sometimes they're up, sometimes they're down, and sometimes you feel like giving up. So I guess at those times when you feel like giving up is when you really revisit back what was the first purpose of you, what was the drive that actually made you want to start the PhD in the first place, and to actually embark on it and push yourself rather than giving up. So thank you for a very very useful actually advice and suggestion, Prof. Anthony. I'm sure many of the students will be able to relate to this, and maybe look back and discuss with the supervisor, as you say, having plan B, plan C, and plan D, and not only looking at the current situation now, but rather also trying to predict that if a similar situation presents itself again, I think they will be more prepared rather than just addressing the issue as it comes. So thank you, Prof. Anthony, and I will actually sort of divert my attention and focus to Prof. Hamid. Okay. All right, Prof. Hamid, so what about you? What is your view on this? Any tips or advice or, or suggestions that you can actually share with our viewers out there? Please, Prof. Hamid.
Good evening, everybody. Assalamualaikum.
Salam.
Actually, Prof. Anthony said something that's very profound, because many students come to see me before they start their master's or they start their PhD and ask me, Prof, is it a good idea for me to do my master's, or is it a good idea for me to do my PhD? The first question I always ask them is, what do you want to do in 5 years' time? What do you want to do in 10 years' time? I always ask those questions first, because your PhD, your degree, it is not the goal in itself. It should be just a ticket to get you somewhere. So that to get you somewhere, that somewhere your destination is actually your motivation. So that should actually be the drive for you to do your PhD. In terms of what's happening now, you have to realize that what Prof. Anthony said, delays, even without COVID, delays in PhD is actually quite normal. Actually, the passing rate of PhD, I think, is less than 50%. So you have to put things into perspective. And for example, your supervisor is supposed to help you, to guide you. Before you start, you surely would have a plan, what you need to do from the first month, the second month, and up to, usually we do the planning for up to 36 months for 3 years, right?
Yep.
So ideally, the thing will be somewhat sequential. You will do this, then you'll do this, and you'll do this. But because of COVID, because of the circumstances now, you will have to rediscuss with your supervisors, what can you do now and what can you do later. I mean, like, for example, now, I remember when I was doing my PhD, my supervisor wouldn't allow me to give any results to him without me writing a report about it.
Okay.
That is actually a very good idea on his part, not just on my part as a student, because that gives me a very good way, such that my works, my experiments become Lego blocks, such that when I want to write my thesis, I know exactly what this experiment is about. I know exactly what that experiment is about, because everything is well documented.
Yeah, through the reports.
Perhaps, yeah, and also when I give him the report, what he does is he actually checks every line, every word, every comma. So he actually checks in bits. So when I was writing my thesis, it took me only about 6 months, because everything is already in bits. It is just like Lego blocks putting things together. So
putting in segments, you need to combine it.
Yes. So maybe for now, if you are stuck, you cannot do what you're supposed to do. Maybe that's the thing you can do. Maybe you can actually relook at the things that you have done and try to restructure the things and put into a bigger picture, because one of the things that can make you lose motivation during your PhD is for not being able to see the bigger picture. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this now in this stage? What is it? What is the contribution of what I'm doing now to the bigger picture, to the PhD I'm going to do? So having a chat with your supervisor, and like maybe like what Prof. Anthony was saying, rescheduling your work, prioritize your work to see what can you do now, what you can do later. And maybe perhaps, for example, different students will be doing different projects. Some will be a lot of simulation. So those who are doing simulation most probably will not be affected that much. Those who have to go into the labs, those who have to meet people, who have to do the interviews, those who have to get the subjects, to get the data. For example, those doing the brain-machine interface, the BMI, getting the EEG signals, those will be most affected. So for these students, you need to talk to your supervisors and look at the whole breadth of your work, of your PhD work, and you can see what you can actually do now, what you can actually do later. Because for me, I think the first part is actually to be able to see the bigger picture. What is my PhD? Why am I now? What have I to do next? But what can I actually do now? So maybe it's a good time for you to actually, like what I said now, re-look back at the work that you have done and restructure it. And maybe then you can actually see what's missing in your work that you have done now. Maybe you can actually fill those gaps before you actually go into the next part of your work. Because sometimes, even when the students, when they almost complete their PhD, when they actually start to write their thesis, then they can see the missing links inside their thesis. Then they have to, they have to redo some experiments or redo some analysis. So now maybe you can take the opportunity when you cannot go into the lab, or you cannot go take the data, to actually look back at your work and try to see what you have done. Have you done all that you need to do? Is there any missing links in the work that you have done? And have a chat with the supervisor. With regards to the university, with regards to the access to the library, to the labs, I don't think that is a problem like what Prof. Anthony said now. The issue may be the limits, the duration of the time you can actually go into the lab. Maybe you can only go to the lab within the office hours and not beyond.
After office hours.
Yeah. So I think basically it's actually looking into the bigger picture. Have a chat with your supervisor. I'm sure your supervisor is as anxious as you are. It is not just about your PhD, it's about his work as well, his research, his other students. So don't be afraid. You are not alone in this. Everybody is actually facing this a similar thing.
Affected. Prof, I have a question. It just got me wondering. Of course, there are a lot of disruptions, and a thought just came to my mind. It's like, all right, like those having like experiments where it is ongoing, where they are really dependent on those, suddenly there's a gap in that. So what happens? Do they have to restart it? Or how do they maneuver towards this situation? Maybe they're already at the finishing stage of the experiment, but because of the, sudden restrictions on having to continue, what happens to these students? It's like, do they have to restart everything again? So what are the options that are available for those students in this stage of their, their stages in their PhD?
This kind of circumstances, you actually have to, there is no one right answer, because different students will be in a different situation. And it's true, some experiment, you cannot stop in the middle. You just have to continue. That is why I said you need to talk to your supervisors, because the university still allows the students to go into the lab, but of course within a limited time. Depending on the situation, the solution may be different. I will not be able to say whether yes or no that you have to start or you can continue on doing your work. That you will have to actually ask your supervisor, because it depends on the circumstances, the facilities, or the consumables, whether you are doing just running an equipment, or is it whether you are actually involving people from whom you will get their data. So there is no one right answer. The solution is for you to be able to speak to a supervisor and try to strategize how to minimize the disruptions you are facing now. For example, if the student is getting the data, that our BMI, brain machine interface students, they're getting the EEG signal, there is not much affected per se, because they can just continue on with another student when the students are able to come to the lab. But those who are doing these fermentation in the lab, where they cannot stop, they actually have to, they can actually have access to the lab. They may not be able to stay in the lab for long, but I'm sure they will be able to actually access the lab, because if they have started it, they must be at the university. So when you are at the university, you do not have the hassle of having to apply to return to the campus and so on and so forth. So I don't think the problem is that huge. Of course, it depends on the student. But if you have started an experiment, you must be on campus at that time during these MCO and so on. So, but the access to the campus, to the labs, I don't think there is a problem. It's just like what Prof. Anthony said. It just may be a shorter duration of time during the day. But please, 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 please have a chat with your supervisor. Please discuss. Do not think you are on your own. Do not think nobody is there to help. Do not think it is the end of the world. It is not the end of the world. Because when we do research, the goal may not change, but the route in which you use or the route you go may change. Because sometimes you're doing experiment, even without COVID, sometimes you do experiment, the machine broke. What do you do? So there will always be alternatives, actually, because that is why when you are planning when you plan the flowchart for a PhD, they all must always be a diamond to see whether what happens if this happen, what happens if this happen, what is the contingencies. That must, because you see, a research is not of is, if you are sure of something, that is not research. Research is, they can be uncertainties. That is why it is research.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, yeah, I guess, like you said, like maybe in the beginning of the journey, people, students and supervisors alike, I think we should be thinking of, yeah, what ifs. I think most of us, we don't do that. You know, it's always a straight road. You know, even in my own personal experience with students, we don't really talk about what if this did not happen. You know, it's always, you know, push on, moving on. So I guess this is the way, in a way, you know, God is also telling us that, you know, life is always not straightforward. You know, you got to be prepared for these unexpected situations. And you know, I was just thinking as well. Of course, this is how we look at, you know, as the journey as it is, and looking at some of the comments that our audiences have actually, you know, keyed in. As you can see, some of them were telling that, yeah, I mean, when you can't do certain things, there are options for deferment or postponement. But then we also forget to think, this is another, I think, more critical issue to address, is the emotional impact that it's having on all the students and supervisors alike. I mean, being in a normal circumstance, I can share that when throughout my journey, I was like, you know, up and down. There were depression modes. You know, there are times you're okay, there are times you're so down that you can't even do your PhD. And imagine having to undergo this emotional roller coaster at this time. So how would you actually manage these students? You know, I think it's even worse because they can't even, at least when you are depressed, you can go and see your supervisor physically, you know, to get that support. But now that you're actually, you know, remotely, you know, away, and you are actually undergoing some sort of, you know, depression, or, you know, feel like giving up. You know, there's so many things students actually go through. It's not only that, maybe they're having financial, and then on top of that, you are unable to progress through your PhD. So what are your advisors? Prof. Anthony, maybe what can you say? How would you advise students having emotional, feeling depressed, you know, feeling like, you know, this is so difficult, I can't cope, I can't go on? Prof.
That's very real, and I think the first thing we need to do is to acknowledge it. So allow yourself to feel it, right, and talk about it. So I think the worst thing that we could do is to keep those feelings that we have hidden until it eats away at us. So in short, don't keep it to yourself. I think all universities have various levels of support structures in place that assist students. So you can think of it as, perhaps, first of all, it's a very informal one. Among your fellow students, you have your own support groups. Previously, before COVID, you see them at your university, you hang out with them, you talk, you go out for makan, and so on and so forth. But now in times of MCO, how do you replicate that same type of social interaction? Perhaps forming a sort of a virtual support group where you check in maybe once every 3-4 days if they are your close group, or if you're very close, maybe every day, I'm not sure. Or if it's a more structured support group in terms of the lab. So certain labs or certain supervisors have groups of students. So it could be semi-formal. Maybe the check-in can happen bi-weekly. The supervisor and a group of students, or just a group of students. You can have senior students and junior students. Now, in a normal face-to-face scenario, you will realize that the senior students become a very good source of support for junior students. So if you can translate that into a virtual environment, you still have that same social structure in place. You also have friendly lecturers, right? You have your postgraduate school, the staff are very friendly. Mine are.
Okay, let's hope Unimate is.
and all universities have a counseling department. Now,
Yeah, the counseling department.
yeah, and then look, I just want to say that we need to move beyond the stigma of counseling. There is nothing wrong in talking to a counselor, or consider it as a neutral third party if you like. It's a safe
Yeah.
environment for you to express your feelings, your
Feelings,
fears, or
yeah,
anything you
problem.
want. Yeah. So it's just being able to express your feelings in a safe environment. I think that's important. And if you can do that with your friends or your supervisors or even other lecturers or
Mhm.
admin staff, then by
Mhm.
all means, or counseling staff of the university.
Thank you. Yes, and I agree with you, lah. I mean, with Prof, with in eroding the stigma of counselling, because it's not only among students or even lecturers as well, academicians as well. When somebody talks about me having to see a counselor, it's always connoted with something really negative, that you are unfunctional. There's something wrong with your mental health. I think
Right.
this is actually something that we need to move away,
Right.
and start regarding as a counselor as actually a person that you can talk to. You can't talk to your parents, you can't talk to the supervisor, you can't see your friends, and then
Right.
actually there's another friend that you can actually, approach and help you, and in a very discreet and actually safe environment. So
Right.
yes, thank you, Prof, for your very enlightening advice on how students are undergoing emotional problems, that they can actually maneuver those emotional roadblocks in order to pursue their PhD in a more calm and more healthy manner.
That's
Prof.
right.
Hamid, what is your advice, Prof. Hamid? I mean,
Um,
you have a lot of students under you, and in UNIMED, he's actually quite popular among the students because of his concern and care and the way he's approached towards students. I mean, Prof. So, how would you actually manage these students if they were having such emotional difficulties, especially at this time? Where they're unable to see you, but rather having to see you online.
you see, one of the prerequisites of a PhD is actually endurance. Uh,
Okay.
it's about going through the thick and thin, and you have to realize that you may be working in a big group in the lab, and suddenly you are back on your own. But you have to realize that some students are actually doing their PhD in the lab all by their own, even before COVID, because that was me. When I was doing my PhD, I was alone in my lab. But um, but what Prof. Anthony said is the support group. I would also like to say this to the supervisors. Please be aware of the difficulties of what your students is experiencing now, because you are experiencing all these difficulties, because I'm experiencing difficulties in trying to get my notes from the normal lectures into online notes and so on so forth, trying to adapt, not able to see the students, because it is as much a frustration on us as
Mhm.
lecturers, as supervisors, not able to see our students as well, as it is to the students not able to see the lecturers or supervisors. So
Yeah.
it actually, that is why you must realize that it is not just you, it is everybody. Everybody is actually going through a very similar situation, some worse than others, but it all has to start with you. You have to be strong, because a PhD requires you to have that endurance in the first place. That is why I go back to what I said initially, when I said that when students ask me whether they should be doing a PhD or not, it is actually what is your goal, what is beyond PhD. So that should be your driving force. But of course, when you're even without COVID, there will be ups and downs. But COVID only, I think, amplifies the situation. If you are not able to do thing, not just because the equipment is broken or something, but it's just sometimes the equipment is there, but you cannot go into the lab, or you cannot travel, you cannot meet people. So the support group is actually very important. please talk to your supervisors, and supervisors, please talk to your students, because I believe the solution is always there. It's whether we want to find a solution or not. And do not feel because I'm a Muslim cannot lose hope. You cannot give up.
Yeah,
There was always solution. If you look into the Quran, there was always it's bad now, it'll always be become better later.
Yeah, true. Yes, it's never giving up lah, basically, and trying to.
Because that's basically what PhD is. PhD is endurance. A lot of people are not able to do to complete their PhD because of this endurance.
Yeah, that means you got to be strong lah, spiritually, isn't it? It's like that determination, that mindset, that you got to really be strong mentally. And I do agree with both. Yes, Prof.
Because you see, I believe no man is an island. You cannot live alone. But
we need each other.
So we need each other. That is why you need the support. Yeah, and my message not only to the students but also to the supervisors: please talk to your students, and to the students, please talk to your supervisors. And please understand that everybody have problems now. It's not just you. Everybody is having problems. So actually, how do you actually mitigate these problems? How to actually mitigate the situation such that you can actually still continue on your PhD?
Thank you very much, Prof. And yeah, the suggestion on having a virtual online support group is actually very, very useful. And as how Prof. Hamid has said, and Prof. Anthony as well, is also not only having that connectivity. I think the constant connectivity is important. I think already as it is, we have to isolate ourselves, but that doesn't mean not being able to be to sort of communicate online, which we can do. And I think most of us, and maybe I'm also thinking, me as a supervisor, I do forget to actually take the initiative to contact my students. I only contact them when I need something from them. And I forget that actually, now in this pandemic situation, we are actually supposed to also look into their welfare as well. Like, occasional hello or a text via WhatsApp to say that, how are you doing and how are you keeping up? So I guess it's true. It's not only students having to take the initiative to contact the supervisors, but I think we as supervisors have to be more concerned now, seeing that the situation has changed and it's not easy for students to come and see us. So I guess we should be making the first move to actually communicate with them.
Can I say something, Sharmini? Can I add a little thing? You see,
yes,
when you are doing PhD, you are already an adult. So to the supervisors, I tell them, please know your students beyond the academic boundaries, because they are actually they are actually adults. You can actually talk to them, because you see, especially with international students, because of the difference in the culture, we do not know how they react to things. We do not know how they react to suggestions by the supervisors. Sometimes you may seem that they are very stubborn, they do not want to accept it. But you have to understand their perspective, that's why you have to go beyond meeting them as a supervisor and a student. If you're only meeting them as a supervisor and a student, you will not see beyond that. You will never understand why the students behave in such a way, because different cultures, they have different ways in actually communicating, and you cannot force something on them. You say, no, you have to change this, or you have to change that, because you have to understand the way they actually think and how they actually receive or accept suggestions. So to supervisors, please know your students just beyond the supervisor-student relationship.
Very rigid. Prof. Anthony, what do you think? Do you think as supervisors we should actually also, maybe in a way, I would talk on myself now. I just started supervising like 2019, and I think my approach with students are always very formal. It's very academic. It's like, when I meet them, it's work, work, work. It's like one word of like, how's everything? Are you okay? Have you eaten? And then straight away to work and all right, complete your deadlines. I need this, I need that, and that's it. And I get frustrated when they don't really get what you're trying to say. And I think what Prof. Hamid is saying is true. I mean, in a way that we forget to get to know the student as an individual rather than just as a commodity that, okay, you're my project and I need to get it done within 3 years. And, so it's all work and make sure everything is done. So what is your view on this, Prof. Anthony? It's like, I think it's quite an interesting perspective that Prof. Hamid has shared with us tonight. Prof. Anthony, what do you think? Should all supervisors take the trouble to get to know their students as individuals, especially international students with differing cultures and differing opinions and mindsets? Prof, please.
Shamini, like yourself, when I was a young supervisor, I think I committed all those that Prof. Hamid mentioned. Let me try to put some structure to it. I mean, in hindsight, as we grow in our career, like Malaysians say, we makan chili and makan salt.
Rasa pedas.
We rasa pedas, so we grow over time. So I guess what I'm about to say, it's not how I behaved many, many years ago. It's actually the result of even my own mistakes over time. So fundamentally, the role of supervisors doesn't change, whether it's a pandemic or non-pandemic. Right? We essentially provide mentorship, guidance. We are there to give the strong hand of corrective actions where required. We provide inspiration, and I think most importantly, as Prof. Hamid mentioned, it's friendship. Right? They are early career academics. Some of them are young, some of them are not so young, but they are all early career academics. For truly good supervisor-student relationships to maintain, I think it cannot be transactional, which is what we all fall into the trap of when we first start out, right? You do this, I give you this comment. You submit this, I give you this mark. It's a very transactional relationship. I think what we realize that, the supervisor is in effect, we are doing two things. We're trying to take care of the content of the thesis, but more importantly, we are molding the character of the scholar so they become useful citizens in the future. So as supervisors, we try to take every opportunity we can when we are with our students to use it as a sharing platform. Include little life lessons if you can. Even share some of your own mistakes and what you've learned from them. Every student have their own strengths and their own shortcomings. In the short 3 to 4 years they are with us, right? We just have to accept there are some things that cannot change within that 3 or 4 years. So very often we find ourselves adapting to the student rather than the other way around. If you kind of know what I mean. So it's a bit of give and take. And for the student, right, getting your scroll it's not the end of your journey, right? Hamid mentioned this early on. It is the beginning of your journey. When you get your scroll, you have not become the expert. What you've really done, you just acquire the skills required for your scholarly journey. And what you need to do is exercise it regularly and diligently. And in time, you will be recognized for your expertise. I think that's a good mantra to keep in mind. So supervisors, just keep that in mind. We are trying to take care of two aspects of a PhD candidature. Right? How do we maintain this in a COVID environment, MCO environment? Well, if you think back to how you have group meetings face to face, right? You gather all your students around, each of them presents, maybe you give comments, you go out for makan, teh tarik after that. So how do you replicate that social camaraderie? Yes, it's not just about the content sharing, but it's about the social support. It's about the companionship. It's about the feeling that this group, you're part of a larger whole, so to speak. And you might have to develop skills to pick up certain things in an online screen you see in front of you, that normally you actually would pick up in a face-to-face meeting. So visual cues, verbal cues, the intonation of the voice. You just might have those skills to pick up those things from an online screen you see, and to be able to probe further, to make your bi-weekly meetings as meaningful as you can. So, and just keep to your schedule. If you've got a bi-weekly meeting, keep to it.
Yeah.
Prof,
Mashamini,
yes, Prof.
I'd like to add, actually, for me, for a PhD, what you are trying to actually train, not just in the area in which you are doing your research, it's the most important to me, apart from endurance, is also your analytical skills. Because you see, for example, the skills that you're learning now, the techniques you're learning now, may be irrelevant in a few years' time. You always have to learn something new. You're always learning something new. And the ability, your analytical skills, ability to analyze the situation, and that is actually what will take you further. And if you look at it now, for example, if you look at your planning, what you have planned to do your PhD, like you want to do this, with those analytical skills will help you then, along with the assistance of your supervisors, for you to chart out what you need to do. Should I do this? Should I do now? Should I do this later? Because the analytical skill will help you actually to make a good plan. And that is actually what you should be training. So now, for example, say now you have a lot of time on your own. For example, you can't really go to the lab that much, so most of the time. So now actually maybe now it's for you to actually hone your skills, hone your analytical skills, for you to read. Because you see, whenever I read literature reviews, I see people reporting, but I don't see a lot of people actually analyzing. And even less people actually do this gap analysis and coming to a conclusions. A lot of people who actually report this person is doing this person is doing that. But the analytical skills, the ability to observe, then to come up with the conclusions from what you have read, that is actually your analytical skills. That is maybe, like I said, I always maybe it's my upbringing. I always see positivity in negativity, or the good things in the bad times. You have to be able to do that, because if you see everything is doom and gloomy during this COVID, then that's it. You actually have to say you actually have to see the good in bad. That only, because I think in life is like that. Because for example, I give you an example. I was in USM before. At that time, UNIMED was just being established, and I wanted to go to UNIMED. It was Kukum then. There were people who were saying, "Hey, don't go. There's a lot of work you will have to do." But actually, doing a lot of work is actually good, because then only you learn. You learn by doing.
Yeah.
So now, for example, because maybe you are too dependent on your friends, you're too dependent on your supervisors. Now maybe it is time for you to actually be dependent on you. To be how can I be more analytical? How can I actually read something and actually able to understand, and not just able to understand, able to extract what the person is trying to say, able to extract what's important to me, not to the author.
Right.
Maybe
trying to be
try to see or to find the positivity in whatever is happening now, regardless whether you can or cannot go to the lab, or you can or cannot meet people to get data. Maybe for you to actually re-strategize your work, because I think that is always good. Because if nothing happened, if COVID did not happen, you will be going through the same thing day in, day out.
actually.
Because it's actually this kind of things to me actually it is good such that it makes you actually wakes you up and make you try to think, God, things are not what it is now, what should I do? Only that you start thinking. If not, you will not. Most of the students, I think, I'll take that back. Not most of the, some students will not think a lot. They just, because they know the supervisor will tell me what to do. But now I need to think what to do. But actually, that is a very, very good practice, because in life nobody tells you what you need to do. You need to figure out yourself what you need to do, and that is where your analytical skills comes in.
Skills coming in. I think with most of our students or generation these days, it's, they expect us to spoon feed. It's like, I have things like, what should I do? I can't do
They have
this.
Mr. Google.
Yeah. So, and you are like having to, okay, I have enough problems as it is, but you have to also think for, but I think it's a good advice that you're given from Hamid, because, like what we would discuss, earlier is that schedules have to change in this pandemic situation. Things that you can do later, you can bring it forward during this time where you are unable to go to the lab and so on. And brush up on your analytical skills. And I think it goes both ways. Listening to the two of you is making me realize that maybe I should also need some training in supervising students. Because I think the approach I'm using, it's actually, I don't know, maybe old-fashioned, or, it's, I haven't really allowed myself to actually look at them beyond as a student. Even with my degree students or master PhD, it's always like, it's work. There's no time for socializing or whatever. It's like, okay, you get things done and you get frustrated when they don't see what you need them to do. I've even resorted to writing up even sections of their chapters for them in order to meet with the deadline. So I think high time for me to actually change my approach. But then what I can conclude is, the relationship between supervisor and supervisee in this COVID, it has not changed much, right? I mean, it's just that the mode of meeting is probably online, but there's no very acute difference that the roles that we have to take for our students, maybe. And you said that Prof. Anthony has said, along with Prof. Hamid, that it's important for us actually to have a virtual support group. And I think I'm guilty of that. I did not actually, I just have separate Google Meets with my students. I never thought of actually, putting them together and meeting them to see, among them, they can also share, or if they're not happy with us being around, at least they have a platform. And this is something that I'll take back, and I will make sure I do it, with my students. All right.
Just remember, Sharmini, behind the facade of a student is a person. You see them as a student, but actually they are a person.
We were students too. I mean, I was a student as well, and I'm wondering why can I, I mean, almost went through a PhD, so all the more we should be able to relate even more, right? Rather than, being so detached with them. So it's something that I will actually take back and, try to change. I recall
maybe I had a very good supervisor. Maybe I had a very good supervisor.
And I guess you took the good things, like maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm more concerned on achieving the goals of getting the students, completed on time, that, I tend to put aside, like, this, my see the students as an individual achieve the results that we want. So it's very interesting what we have shared so far with, what we've gotten from both of you, profs. It's also for me, I mean, even a moderator here, but I'm feeling that, I'm guilty of most of the things, and I think I need to change the way I actually address my students as well. And especially now when, I guess the students are more fragile, because they're, in being remotely available is actually something very challenging. And I want to say thank you personally, because I learned something tonight. And I guess we have a lot of questions from students tonight. So shall we proceed with addressing some of the questions from the students?
Sure.
Yes.
I think we can change the tone. We can accept the questions from the students.
So now I will sort of ask questions from the students, and I'll open it to either of you. So if you're feeling like answering the question, just answer it straight. So I have one from Miss Azrin Jalasi. I think it's she. She's asking, what's the best way to stay motivated in this stressful COVID-19 attack? So what's the best way to stay motivated?
Remember why you started.
Okay.
You see, even without COVID, students doing PhD, it's common for you to actually lose sight of the end. It's actually quite common. Actually, it is not just about COVID, because even for me, like I said, I had a good supervisor. I did feel like not continuing my PhD, but I was just thinking then, if I stop now, I will lose everything that I've done, because I was a scholar, because I was sponsored to do my degree, master's, PhD, so I cannot stop. If I stop, I would lose everything, and I have to pay back my scholarship and everything. But that's why I said, when the students wants to do ask me for advice, they want to do a PhD. Remember, what is your goal? Remember your goal, because your goals shouldn't change. Things may change, your ways may change, but your goals should not change. That should keep you motivated. If your goal is right, if not, you have to because you see, PhD, it's not just doing something. It's actually your commitment. You're spending your life, your resources for at least 3 years. So you must think about, should I just give this away? It is not, because you see, that's why to do a PhD, it is not in Malay, it's not sambil lalu. It's actually commitment. That's why I say endurance, commitment, because you are investing 3 years of your life, 3 years of your resources to something. So if you give up, the only person who will lose is you. So don't give up.
Regardless of the circumstances, it's like, driving yourself to just keep on going. Yeah, like I think it's true now. When you set a goal,
I have something, because I have a friend, a very dear friend. He always manages to make me see things in a brighter perspective. When I was complaining to him, I got so much work, and he says, "Thank God you are not a refugee." When he says that, I said, "Okay, I've got nothing to complain."
Yeah,
I've really got nothing to complain.
yeah.
So that is my friend's way of actually making me realize that. That's why I said, you see, you have to realize that this is affecting everybody around the world, not just us, not just you, not just us, not at universities, everybody around the world. So our task is actually, because you see, I always believe that as a Muslim, God gives you strength, and with that strength comes responsibility. For us who are doing PhD, our strength is actually in our mind. So you must be strong in your mind, because you have chosen this faith, because you do not need to have your physical strength to do your PhD.
That's
You
more
need
mental.
to have, yes. So if you have started it, that means you are strong mentally. That means you can do it, but you must find the support. That's why I said, talk to your supervisors, talk to your friends, because no man is an island.
Yeah, you can't be alone. We need each other. Prof. Anthony, would you like to add anything? Thank you, Prof. Hamid. Prof. Anthony?
No, I think Prof. Hamid gave a very good answer. But if I can add on that, very often I think the first question or the first issue a student raises is really just on the surface. If truly wanted to help the student, we need to dig deeper. So I would probably ask this person, right? Tell me what your motivation level was like before, and how you change. Because when we try to understand further, we may find the root source of the issue, which may be completely different than what the student imagined in the first place.
Yes.
So that helps us to address the true root cause of the problem. Right? It's I guess it's a standard tip in most ways of troubleshooting. Right? You keep asking.
Yes.
So there's a short answer. Short answer is I'll refer to what both of us have said in the last 1 hour.
Yeah.
The long answer would be, tell me more, right?
Yeah. True.
Continue the conversation from there.
Yeah.
From Anthony said, from my experience, usually the students only tell you the symptoms, not the problem. Usually. You have to assist the student to actually try to make him or her realize actually what is his or her problem, for you to be able to help him or her solve the problem. Because usually the students will only tell you the symptoms, because maybe they do not know what is the problem. They can see the symptoms, and what they can relate to you are the symptoms. That's actually quite common.
And very often, at the end of the sharing session, they have their own solution. So you don't really have to give them the solution.
Okay, it's interesting. It's really true. Yeah, we need to ask more rather than just addressing it. And I think I agree with Prof. Hamid. Most of us don't really know what exactly is the problem, but yeah, they do exhibit the symptoms. And I think it's up to us supervisors to actually identify and recognize those symptoms and guide them to actually solving whatever problems they may be facing. So we have one more question coming to the supervisor-supervisee relationship. All right, this is from an individual, but there's no name here. So the question is this: situation where your supervisor seems not to have time for you because the face-to-face relationship isn't there anymore due to the pandemic. How do you approach him or her to rekindle that enthusiasm? So, Prof. Anthony, Prof. Hamid?
Actually, Prof. Anthony.
Pick up the phone, send an email. Now, okay, I guess the answer is actually two ways. One, there's a student dimension. The second one is perhaps for university management, deans, heads of schools, and so on and so forth. I think I'm just reiterating what Hamid said previously about supervisors taking a more proactive role. So from the student's part, if you feel you've been distanced from your supervisor for quite some time, remember your supervisors are also human beings. And if you feel lonely, you've been affected, and you're sad, depressed, or stressed, perhaps they are also as well, because we've all had to adapt our teaching to online. And we just had this discussion before this webinar, how stressed we all were adapting to online environment. So maybe pick up the phone, send a text message, say, I'm really looking forward to discuss an issue with you. Could I have half an hour of your time? Let me know when you're available. And from the other end, it is for the management of the university, the heads and all that, to constantly remind their academic staff of the mentorship role a supervisor actually has with the students, and to keep a regular contact with them.
That's good.
You see, communication is actually between at least two parties. Communication. It is not just one person. If one person talking, it is not a communication. So, like what Prof. Anthony said, it's the same, because both are people. The student is a person. The supervisor is also a person. But also, the student need to understand that the university has ways in which to support the student in case of a problem with the supervision, or a problem with the supervisors. There's always avenues in which to support the student if there's any difficulties in the students contacting the supervisors, the problems in the student in getting any support from the supervisor, because usually we will always have one co-supervisor, and the student will always have an avenue in which he or she can communicate with the university or to the faculty if he or she have any problem with the supervisors. And that stands even before COVID.
Right.
So the student, as a student, you must know what are your rights. You must know what are the facilities and services available to you. You see, like I realized that in Malaysia, at least in the we are more teachers rather than lecturers, because when I was studying, I remember in the UK it is lectures. The lecturers lectures, and not many actually teach. They will be talking they will be lecturing maybe to 300 students to 500 students, then they go, then another lecturer will come in. But I find that in Malaysia we have more. Maybe it's the culture, because in the UK nobody asks for attendance when I was a student at the undergraduate level. But here you'll be barred from the exam if you don't attend 20% of your lectures. So it's the dynamics of the student lecturer, student supervisor is different. But I think as a student you must know what is your right, what is the avenues you can use, and so on and so forth. And like I said, but basically communication is between two people at least. So
Yeah, true.
pick up the phone, like Prof. Anthony said, pick up the phone, email or WhatsApp, or now people are going to Telegram or Snap, Simple or something.
Yeah, Facebook, Snapchat. I think we also need to tell, like, I guess there's some supervisors who don't allow students to call them. You know, they have that restriction that, okay, you only can contact me via WhatsApp. So I guess on part of supervisors also, we should be telling them that, you know, if you're unable to reach us, or we are not responding to your texts as immediate as you need it or promptly, then they should be able to call them personally. And as how Prof. Hamid has also shared that, I think students also need to know of their rights. It's like, I think most of us, when we are assigned with one supervisor, we tend to think that it is, you know, until the end. You know, there's no room for us in wanting to change, or if we do want to change, there might be some very negative repercussions from it. But I think what students need to know as well, that even in this pandemic, if they find the supervisors not being available, they should be also be given, they should know that, oh, I can change the supervisor. I don't need to stick to this supervisor until the end, right? Does it, like, should universities change policies, like be more supportive to students when they request for supervisor change, rather than, you know, some situations or some university, they might like, you know, students are afraid to change supervisors. I think when I was, you know, when I was studying my PhD, I had that thought, it's like, what if I don't, there's no chemistry between me and the supervisor? You know, and you got to do, it's not to say a 1 year kind of engagement. PhD normally takes you about 3, 4, or 5 years. No, can I change? You know, those are the things that is not communicated to most of the students. And I guess in this pandemic situation, all the more students need to know that, like I said, the supervisors are not available, are not giving the support that they need. I think they have every right to also change the supervisor. That can be another alternative if they're finding difficulty in communicating with their supervisors during the pandemic. Would you all agree with what I'm sharing here?
I think the important thing is that all universities actually have a process in place already,
Yes.
and this
Yes.
is regardless of whether COVID or non-pandemic or whatever.
Yes.
It applies equally, and there are steps and processes to ensure that a request is reasonable. There are grounds, justifications for the change, and it will be entertained. In fact, we have done it before.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, that's true, because you see, actually, most of the time the students do not know their rights, because actually in the university, the students can ask for a change supervisors, the students can ask for a change in the co-supervisors, the students can ask for additional co-supervisors from other universities if they need to, for example, to use the facilities, or they need this expertise. But that's why, you see, when we go to school, it is a law for us to go to school. But when you go to university, you want to go to university. So essentially, it is your responsibility to know your rights. Because if you see because at the end of the day, the supervisor is also a person, and the interest may or may not be similar to yours. So if you have any problems, please see the program chair or the postgraduate office to get some advice. because it is never set in stone that this person
Yeah.
must be your supervisor. There are avenues in which to, of course, we will see or what are the valid reasons given and so on and so forth. But that is not a problem actually, and that is actually even before COVID. That is a standard procedure.
Right. So I guess students should also know their rights, lah. Like I think most of them are unsure.
They must
and
know their rights actually.
Yeah, they must know. I think we as supervisors should be able to tell them as well when we first meet them that it's like they have certain avenues as well if things doesn't work out between the two. So yes,
You don't say that when you meet someone. You don't say it to your wife, your future wife. Oh, things may not work out. You don't say that.
Okay, we shouldn't like verbalize it. I mean, but then how would students know their rights then? I mean, or maybe it should
They
be the
can check.
postgraduate school.
They can check the guidebooks. There's always a student's reference. It's always stated there. There's always avenue which forms to fill in. They've got the names of the forms and everything. Everything is available online.
Fine. All right.
Handbook.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof.
Yeah.
Shall we answer? We have 3 more questions. Will it be all right to address these 3 questions from our audience?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So there's one more from Miss Atiko Rahman. All right. Her question is actually quite, I think it's relevant to many of the students here. All right. How much are the possibilities that after COVID, PhD research subject and topics will change directly from the traditional or regular trend? Is there a need to change the research topics? I'm thinking like maybe those where they have experimentations where it was, arrested, or maybe I should ask you all exactly. I mean, is there a possibility to change?
You see, to me, the interest in the research community always moves with the times, always moves with the current. It will always be affected by whatever's happening. Because, for example, you see, when we started having this COVID in the first round, the ministry is giving a lot of grants, people to do research into COVID. And that will also, in effect, those people who are out of work, wanting to go back into academia, wanting to do their masters or wanted to do their PhD. You see, things will always change. Nothing, actually, the only constant is change. So there will always be change. But whether there will be a difference, in change in the way of the supervision, I think so. In the way of you doing your work, I think so. Because, for example, now I remember last time when I was doing my work, we had to use MATLAB, and it's that now you don't need to use MATLAB because you can use Google Colab.
Okay.
And use Python on it is for free. Of course, there's a limit in time. I think it's 10 hours or 12 hours.
Okay.
So things are changing now, even before COVID, actually. And things will only keep on moving and keep on changing.
So that means the possibilities of the research change also is actually, regardless whether it's pandemic or not, but if the trend changes, then you would have to change as well because you got to keep up with the latest trend, right?
That's why I said the most important thing out of this is actually your analytical skills. Okay. Because what you learn now may not be relevant in a few years' time, actually.
Yeah, in a few years coming. Prof. Anthony, any thoughts on this? Anything you'd like to share?
Well, I guess if I give an analogy, right? So there are many ways to slice a watermelon. The outcome is we want to eat the watermelon, right? So you can, but there are more than 100 ways you can cut it up.
Yeah,
I think what this pandemic has taught us to do is to reflect on how we approach a research problem and how we approach a research question. We are very attuned to what we know when we address those research questions. We use the methodologies that we know of. This pandemic has forced us to look at alternatives that will still allow us to answer the research questions, address the problem statement, but perhaps using a different approach, a different methodology. Now, it also depends on the stage of the project that the student is in. You might see from now moving forward, and perhaps in the next 2-3 years, many of the new projects being offered utilizing alternative approaches because of convenience, access, readily available resources, so on and so forth. But in 5 years' time, when this pandemic is over, we've got it under control, we will come back to more traditional ways of pursuing research. But we will have the benefit of a broader repertoire of tools to use to address research problems.
Okay. Thank you, Prof. That's very, the analogy is really very relevant to what we, I mean, the alternatives and options are more now with technology and like you said, you know, as when you come back to the normal, regular face-to-face mode or the normal, not the new norm. I mean, it's also a good thing to actually look into what has been changed, what needs to be changed, and what can be retained. So thank you, Profs, for those very enlightening analogy and also interesting input. We have 2 more. Okay, there's one from Titi Lopi Olusola. All right, she's asking, hello, Prof. Please, how can student get his or her data collection during this COVID period when schools are doing online studies? Thank you, sir. I think what I can, from this question, she's telling how can we actually do data collection, but she's also relating to where schools are doing online studies. Does that mean that getting data from online sources, does it make it reliable or valid in a way? I mean, now that I guess this, sorry.
Can you read the question again?
All right, she's asking this. Hello, Prof. Please, how can student get his or her data collection during this COVID period when schools are doing online studies?
Oh, you see, we are doing online studies, but the labs are still open, of course, with restrictions. If what she means is that the teaching and learning is done online, however, the labs are actually still open. If I understand what she asks, because I think she asked whether, I think the assumption is when you are doing online learning, the labs are closed. But I think the university is actually operational, still operational, maybe not 100%, maybe not 100%, but the labs, for example, in my faculty, the labs can be open on request, because the technicians will only be at the university on request, otherwise they'll be working from home. Same with the lecturers as well. But if any lecturers or technicians need to be around for the students to have access to the labs, then they will be allowed to come in. If I understand her question.
I think that's what she's trying to say, and I think what the universities have to do is actually make it available to students, like you say, if there's a need for them to come, and they're able to physically come, maybe because they're not in a place too far. So they should have some allowance where the university should have that that facility for them to come and do what they need to do. Am I right?
Universities will have these SOPs. They will have to follow the procedures. For example, in Malaysia, it was by the Ministry of Higher Education. We will have to follow those procedures.
Guidelines.
But the students are allowed back.
Yes, absolutely.
Professor, what is your intake on this? I mean, coming from a private university, is there such allocations that you all actually would entertain such needs from requests or such situations where students need to come in order to, to continue or complete their PhDs?
Actually, we're guided by the same MOHI document as well, the Ministry of Higher Education circulars. and whatever allowances they provide for universities. Currently, there are 6 categories of students, and research students is a big chunk of it. So our labs are open, studios, even for practicals that are required for students are allowed to continue. So we are doing what we are allowed to do. And postgraduate research is definitely one of it. But I think I also want to address maybe what you mentioned about the interpretation of the question about online data.
Online validity of the...
Yeah, look, I think data is data, whether it's taken from experimental, whether it's simulation or online, right? The same tools to assess the validity and reliability of data points should be used. So again, it depends on the type of method that's being used or questionnaire or something like that, right? There must be established methods to determine validity and reliability.
I mean, I was just thinking like social sciences, I mean, put aside engineering and, science. Social sciences, we normally get our data through, questionnaires, and we follow up through the questionnaires, personal interviews, face-to-face interviews. We do focal group studies, and this, I think in the pandemic situation, is much more challenging for, those under the social sciences, domain or genre, because it's very difficult to get this face-to-face interaction, and when I saw her, I mean, maybe I would have misinterpreted with her question at the beginning, but this, as you've answered, Prof. Anthony, that you do question the reliability and validity as it is. When you do a face-to-face survey, people do always ask you of the reliability of it. Like, were they really sincere in answering questions? And then now having to change to an online mode, does it make it less valid? Does it make it less reliable? Because you're getting your data through online, you're unable to see the respondents. So, it got me thinking as well, how do you prove the validity of it? At least in a face-to-face situation, if somebody inquires of the question or the answer, you can actually go back to the respondent and, get more clarification through a personal one-to-one interview. But with an online survey, how do you actually prove that, the data that we've gotten is actually as reliable? I know it's sufficient enough for you to use it as a standard argument to defend your thesis. So that's actually got me thinking. In this pandemic situation, it's not going to be that easy.
Well, I look forward to a PhD Viva that does this. I really want to learn from the process as well.
Yeah, it's something new, and it's making me think, how do we maneuver towards it? But I guess we have to address it as it's come case by case, and but something to think about.
There is also the situation where in a live face-to-face interview, we always ask the question of interviewer bias and position of authority, right? But if you do an online synchronous interview, you actually remove that fear. You could actually get a more truthful and honest response from the person you're interviewing. So I'm just guessing here. Social science, I mean.
Yeah, maybe it's more better. Prof. Hamid, what's your take on this? I mean, what's your view?
You know what's my take on this? You see, I believe that when the situation change, you must adapt. You must be able to adapt. If you keep on doing the same thing the way you've always done, when the situation change, it will fail. So you know what I mean? Because there is no one right answer. It's just that you will need to see, because you see, data is data. But first, you must understand first what data do you need and why do you need that data.
Okay.
If you understand what data you need to, because you know why you want to use the data, then you will know how you want to get the data. If the situation is like this, if the situation is like this, or if the situation is like this. That's why I said, always, as a researcher, we always need to look things in the bigger picture.
Okay.
Because you see, regardless of the method in which you get the data, if you know the goal in why you want to have the data, and you will know what type of data do you need, so you will know which avenues you can take if this is the circumstance is like this or the circumstance is like that. That is why I said,
Yeah.
for a researcher, the analytical skill is very important for you first to be able to see the bigger picture, for you to decide, because you will always have to decide, because when you get the results, you always need to decide which way to go.
Yeah. True.
So it's actually it's part and parcel of PhD actually.
Great. Thank you, Prof. Hamid. It's a very, very. Yeah, it's true what you say. It's not like you say, not definite. It changes according to the situation, and I hope it's useful. Advice to all who are listening as well. I think all of us in the social science field. All right, let's address one more question before we end our session for tonight. Okay, this one is not really linked to COVID, but I think we can also link to pandemic. This is to do with fast track PhD. Okay, this is from Miss Warda. Okay, she's asking this question: how do you address the knowledge gap when a student who wanted to do a fast track PhD right after graduating a degree? I'm always having hard times when discussing with students who are doing masters. So what I guess is this student, maybe she's just finished a degree, or maybe she wants to do a fast track PhD right after degree. So what are your views on this?
I think you see, the first thing is let me put it in a different way. You see, sometimes I see people who has got a PhD and yet do not have these analytical skills.
Yeah.
But I've seen undergraduates who have very, 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 very acute analytical skills. Supervisors, I feel that universities must train supervisors to be able to see this and to be able to give the training for the students. For example, for us, every postgraduate students must take ENT 650 research methodology. They must take that. That is actually to open up the avenue of the students in which to think analytically and to see things analytically. But to me, it is not about a fresh grad from an undergraduate. Sometimes people who has been working for so many years as a lecturer, they suddenly want to do a PhD. They do not have that analytical skills. So I believe that there should be, for example, for us, if a fresh graduate undergraduate wants to do let's say they get a first class, they're allowed to do a PhD, then they must do research methodology class to build up this one. Because to me, it's not a problem of somebody jumping straight from an undergraduate degree to a PhD, or they having to do the masters and then to me, that is not the issue. The issue is the readiness of the person, the readiness of the person, and his or her clear intentions and motivations. I think that's more important. Because sometimes the students may be doing finding a project with a supervisor. He or she may actually have intentions to do research or to do PhD or masters or PhD, and he or she seems to like what the supervisor is how the supervisor is guiding him or her during the undergraduate years. Because I always, for example, for me, I always I don't try to dictate the students. I will always make the students try to think on his or her own.
Yeah.
Even at the undergraduate level. So hopefully then he or she can actually make the decision, because that is actually the basis of analytical skills.
Okay. You have a point there, actually. Prof. Anthony, what do you think?
I agree with Prof. Hamid's view that it's not about the student wanting to be on a fast track or slow track, regardless of which pathway, and we have to distinguish between accepted entry pathway versus the caliber of the candidate in front of us. So regardless of the entry pathway that the student is coming into, we still have to assess the candidate on the qualities that Prof. Hamid talked about, right? Motivation, analytical, the desire to develop their analytical skills. And the entry pathway is just there as an option for students in various stages of their education level.
So that means we actually have to also help them to decide whether, whatever modes they do decide to take, whether it's through a normal track or a fast track. I guess it's our role as supervisors or maybe educators to actually guide them that if they're ready, then you can proceed with the fast track. But if they're not ready, then they should be, equipping itself with those analytical skills that is needed. Talking about analytical skills, I think maybe I need that training as well.
We all do. We all do.
Yeah.
It's like
You see, the thing is, I don't think the responsibility falls on a person. It's actually the system. The system must be able to detect this, because you see, if the responsibility is on a person, if the person do not do his or her, or the person falters, then the system fails. The system cannot fail. It must falls back onto the system. Because that is why you see, if you look at the processes in which a candidate applies for her master's or PhD, there are certain processes he has to go through, and those processes will ensure this candidate will be given whatever requirements, whatever courses, or whatever training that he or she will need in order to be able to do the PhD.
Right. Yeah, that is true. Thank you, Prof. And I saw one more question actually before we end. I did say we're going to end this, right? But it was quite interesting because it got me thinking as well. I don't know whether the two of you saw it or not. I can't remember the individual, but it came up here on our screen. Yeah, this one's from Divasnari Muda. She says, we get scared. What if during an online Viva, suddenly the line breakdowns and you're unable to get back online? So what happens? I was thinking too, what should we do?
Don't worry. They will always be rescheduled, because we understand. Because we understand. You see, we are evaluating the candidate, not the system. If the system fails, the system fails. It's not about the candidate.
Yes, don't worry. Pass one nari, right? So don't worry. It will be rescheduled.
Imagine having to go through that process again. When I was going through for my Viva, I was thinking, that's it once, and I don't want to go through it again. Imagine it's like you're almost ending the Viva in the online session, and everything just goes disconnected.
But, okay, look, it depends on what stage of the Viva the breakdown has occurred. If the chunk of the Viva has been completed, I think the panel examiners have an option to make a decision whether they want to reschedule or not. So I would really ask the candidate not to worry too much.
And I was just looking at where it has disrupted, which part or which phase of it was disrupted, to see whether you need to have it again or right. That is quite a relief, even though I'm no longer a student. All right. Okay. It's really very interesting. I learned so much from the both of y'all actually, and as myself as a supervisor, I think there are a lot of things that I think I need to improve on as well in terms of me addressing my students and also equipping myself with the skills that is needed to guide them more, rather than faulting the students all the time, or we don't finish on time, or because you don't listen to me, or waiting. I have this, like I told you so, you didn't listen to me, that is why you did not get through your proposal defense. So I'm going to change.
Sharmini, there was a question just now about GOT. I think I saw the question.
True.
To me personally, you need to do what you need to do. If you can finish it in 6 semesters, fine. But most students do not finish in 6 months. Most students may be able to submit after 6 semesters. Most students may be able to submit after 6 semesters. but not many students actually are able to finish. If everything goes smoothly, you get the results what you want, you may actually, but not many students actually are able to finish in 6 semesters. That's not the norm. That's an exception.
You know, especially in social science field. I mean, I'm in a purely engineering university, you know, and you hear your colleagues, oh, we get it done in 2 years, 3 years, and I'm thinking for social science, 3 years is actually, I think the earliest you can is 4 years, and I think
I tell you one story. In my lab last time, there was a student from India, because I was in Liverpool. He finishes everything in 2.5 years. Why? Because he has no money. He has to live in the lab. He actually sleeps in the lab. So he is working virtually day and night. That's how he's able to finish everything in 2.5 years. This is a true story at my university.
That's motivation for you.
Yeah.
That's motivation, yeah, for it's actually what drives you to do it. And I think so that means, are you all in agreement that, you know, in our Malaysia, I mean in Malaysia, I mean I'm in a university, we are told that, you know, as a supervisor, you need to make sure your students finish within the 3 years time as well. So I guess I want to extend it to 4 years actually.
To me, quality is more important.
Yeah, it's actually it's not how fast you do it, rather, you know, the journey that you took it, and the results of it matters, right? It doesn't, the time doesn't really, it's not a, it's not a,
it does. Time does matter, because you see, to be fair, every candidature has a maximum period. I think for a PhD is 6-7 years or something like that. Of course, they are, but do not force yourself too much on the 3 years, on the 6 semesters. No, on this minimum, because normally it takes time. Because usually when a lot of CS students, in the first year they do things, but they don't really know what they are doing in the first year usually. So, and they are able to see the bigger picture. I think by the second year, then they can see the bigger picture. Then they start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But then things can happen. What do you call this? Machines can break down. COVID can come. So you see, the most important thing is for you to be able to continue with that end in sight. And of course, the quality of work, because if you finish in so fast, there's no quality. When you viva, you're just going to falter.
Yeah, like, there's no point as well. True. Prof. Anthony, anything to add on?
About GOT, this debate.
Yeah. What about Taylor's University? What are your policies, and you know, how do you address, like, is there any penalty or towards supervisors who are not able to get their students finished online? You know, things.
No. There's no penalty. But if you do manage to graduate a student within the GOT period, now we follow. We use as a benchmark the GOT definition under MIRA 2 document, which is 7 semesters. Again, I want to stress the caveat that the duration of a PhD is dependent on the project and the field that you choose.
The research.
And the way GOT is defined is actually a guidance of best practice for a typical PhD, for a typically competent student, for a typically competent supervisor of 7 semesters. It does not mean that every PhD must finish in 7 semesters.
7 semesters.
It definitely does not mean that if you finish in 8 or 9 semesters, that you are a bad thesis or a bad student. Or if you finish in 4 or 5 or 6 semesters, that you have somehow taken a shortcut. It has no bearing on an individual student or thesis. It's basically a guidance document which I think university managements use.
It's like a benchmark class, just like a point of reference.
Yes. And there are issues and variety of reasons that universities decide to follow the benchmark. Resource management, turnover of students, reasonable graduation times. But I guess for students here, you know, don't get wedded to the idea that GOT is the be all and end all. Like Prof. Hamid said, the quality of it is most important.
That's the process. Yeah. And it all, yeah, like you said, I agree. It depends on the research scope as well. What you're doing, actually, that's also another factor that would determine whether you finish within the 3 years, or some might take longer due to the nature of the research.
Because
Right.
I need to reiterate this. A PhD is only your ticket to somewhere.
Mm.
It is
Yeah.
not a goal in itself.
Right.
Yeah, I
Please
remember
that.
true, and this was also actually emphasized in our second episode by Prof. Rizal and also by Prof. Attar. They did say that, you know, you only begin after the PhD is completed. That is where the journey starts, not during the PhD itself.
Right.
So one final question before we end. It's not a question. Basically, what do the both of you have to advise, like a takeaway advice to our students out there, and, you know, supervisors alike as well? What's the take? What would you like to advise them? What is your takeaway advice for tonight? Prof.
Okay,
Hamid,
I'll start.
Okay, Prof.
Remember, both supervisors, students, both are persons, just people. So, like I said, no man is an island. If you have any problems, if you anything, just talk. Because a lot of problems in the world, I feel that it's a miscommunication or no communication.
Okay.
So I think we need to remember that, because if you have problems, everybody else have problems as well, and you may not be alone. And actually, they may be a standardized procedure to help people with a problem like yours, for example. So don't think if you have a problem, that's the end of the world. They say what they say. It's not over till the fat lady sings. No, what I'm saying is you have to understand that to supervisors as well, if you look at the student, it is not just a student, it is a person. And to the student, when you look at a supervisor, it is not just a supervisor, it's also a person. So communication is key. Please.
All right, thank you, Prof. Prof. Anthony, what is your takeaway advice?
I'll try to maybe summarize what Prof. Hamid has already said. Very useful advice. And just finish off by saying that you start your PhD with enthusiasm,
Yes,
but graduate with resilience.
okay.
And for supervisors, we are stewards in ensuring that this happens. Okay.
Very, very interesting analogy, nicely summed up. Communication is important, and having to actually respect one another and treat each other as individuals rather than, you know, as something that you, like a project or a commodity that you need to finish. I think something for me to take away, actually. And I would like to tell all the students, as I always do in my previous 2 episodes, is never give up now. I mean, life is hard as it is, and, you know, every one of us want things to go smoothly, but, you know, that is life. It is never smooth. It's never easy. So never give up. And as the both of you profs that actually emphasize is, your goal is important, and to keep yourself motivated, to always remember why you started your journey in the first place. I think that will keep you, you know, intact. Will be one of those factors that will push you to, you know, to endure whatever hardships that you're undergoing to finish it at the end. Remember the goal. And I always say, there's a saying, when there's a will, there's always a way, correct? So I guess before I end, I would like to thank both of you professors. I learned a lot today, and I hope the audiences did too. And I think I will also try to, you know, train myself. Before that, I never thought that, you know, it was always exciting to be wanting to supervise students. But I did not realize that, you know, as being trained as an educator, you also need to be trained as a supervisor. And this is something I think I'm going to push forward at our university. Rather than always thinking of ways to train our students, I think we ourselves need to train ourselves on how to become a good supervisor, because it's not a skill that it's you don't have it. I mean, if you have it, it's innate, then it's good. But I think most of us are lacking in that. I know I do. So this is something that I will work on, you know, after this. And
get it going. It's going in the next edition of the standards document, supervisory training programs.
Yes, it's a very, I think it's a very essential tool. And then maybe, who knows, I think with us supervisors being trained, I think we can actually get students finishing things the way we want them to finish. I mean, I don't want to be writing chapters for students because I tend to do that now. If I feel they're not getting what I'm trying to say, to make them achieve the, the deadlines that we have set, I do find myself having to write, especially international students from the, it's, and I don't think that's a very healthy way because you tend to spoon feed. And I always liked Prof. Hamid's approach because he makes you think. And I think in that sense, I like, because for my students, if I feel they're not getting what they want, I give them what I need them to do. And I don't think that's a very educational process for them. So
No.
yeah, supervisory training for me, number 101. So all right, I will end tonight's session. Thank you so much, Prof. Anthony. It has been very enlightening. Prof. Hamid as well. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful for the time, and I think all of the audience out there feel the same as well. So all the best as well in your, your future undertakings, and may you continue to be good examples and role models for not only students but also educators and academicians, around. So thank you very much. And before we end, I would like to thank all the participants as well. And don't forget that please subscribe, like, and share our YouTube channel, the platform for research and development. And we'll be having the 4th episode maybe in a month's time. So thank you very much and good night. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Stay safe.
Bye.
Thank you. Best wishes to all students here. Good night. Or good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are.
Yes, yeah, we forgot it's international. Thank you, Prof. Okay, night.